Hey guys, happy Friday. Today I'm going to be trying my hand at a video tutorial on how to draw the outline of a portrait, and I'm going to do this 3 different ways. 1 is tracing, 2 is gridding, and 3 is freehanding. So the reason I said freehand in air quotes is because I am actually going to be doing a little bit of measuring just to point me in the right direction for where the eyes, the nose, and the lips are going to go. I struggle with proportions a lot, and so in order to get the most accurate, close to likeness drawing possible, I am going to be doing a little bit of measuring. In portraiture, it doesn't matter how good your shading is and how well you can render the picture afterwards. If you don't get the proportions right, it's never going to look like the person you're trying to capture. And here's today's subject. Now I've already measured out in my sketch pad 3 different boxes. The dimensions of the photograph were 5 1/4 by 5 1/2. So what I'm going to be doing is each separate box is going to have one separate method. So tracing, grid, and freehanding. Each one is going to go in its own box. And I'm going to start out with the tracing method, and I'm going to be using tracing paper to do that because I don't have a light box. So the reason I came up with these 3 techniques because I did some research when I was trying to do portraiture for my channel to see what types of techniques other artists use, and these were 3 different methods that I've seen other people use to try to get very accurate outlines for their portraiture. And the way I think about this channel is that I'm learning and I'm pretty much taking you guys along for the ride. So what I wanted to do is try to see which one of the 3 methods works best for me and how long each one takes. So at the end I'm going to give you a review and any helpful tips that I find along the way. So I'm getting started here with the tracing method, as I mentioned before. And one tip that I want to give you guys right off the bat is to tape down your reference photograph before you put the tracing paper on top of it. This will help it stay put and not move as you're drawing over it with your tracing paper. When you're tracing, you're going to see later on that we're going to do the tracing several times. And what happens is any slight variation, let's say your line is a little bit off on the first pass, the first trace, any slight variation like that is just going to get amplified over the next passes, and you're not going to end up with a very good final result. So you want to be as accurate as possible with putting down your lines when you're tracing. So the tracing paper is quite opaque and there's not a lot of contrast in the photograph. I'm having a really tough time seeing the features and where I'm supposed to trace here. So I'm actually going to take a Uniball micron pen, and I'm going to trace the outline first and then put the tracing paper back on and see if I can see the features a little bit better if I do that. So just hang tight with me while I do that. Okay, so I've secured the tracing paper as well so that it doesn't move either while I'm doing the outline, and I'm just going over the photograph with a regular pen. If I were to go ahead and put down pencil over that and then put the tracing paper on my sketch pad, what I would get would be the mirror image of the reference photograph, which I don't want. So I'm going to trace the outline first, and then I'm going to flip the tracing paper over, and I'm going to be tracing the outline again, but this time I'm going to be using a soft core pencil, like a 4B or a 6B. You can see I missed something there, so I just went back and put that in. And then, so as I was saying, what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to flip the paper over, and you'll see me here go over the outline on the back side with a 6B pencil. And you can see the image, if I had transferred it like this, it would have been flipped. So it would have been the mirror image of the reference photograph, which I didn't want. So the reason you want to use a soft core pencil is because it rubs off very easily. So it will transfer onto your sketchpad paper very easily. All you're going to have to do is just press on the back side of it, of the outline. So we're going to be outlining this again with the pencil side of the tracing paper down. So here I have put down the pencil side of the tracing paper onto my sketchpad, and I'm going over it with a orange pen. And the reason I do that is because I want to see which lines I've drawn, and therefore which part has already transferred. I've found in the past that I've missed spots if I didn't do that, so using a different color pen is a good visual reminder of which parts you've gone over and which you haven't. And that's the way that the transfer looks. So what I'm gonna do is I'm actually gonna go into there and shape out the outline a little bit better and fill in those gaps that I have. And I just want to have a general outline here. I'm not focusing too much on details. That's going to come later with the shading. So as long as I've got the eyes, the mouth, and I'm missing a nose, but I'll come back to it later and put it in, I'm fine. So I'm going to move on to doing the freehand version. And as I mentioned before, I'm going to be doing a little bit of measuring. So here I'm marking out where the top of the head, the bottom of the chin, the brow line, well actually the hairline, the brow line, the eye line, and the bottom of the nose, and the top of the lips and the bottom of the lips are. For the eye line, I'm going through the corner of the eye, through the corner of both eyes. And once I have these lines down, I'm just going to be measuring from the top of the paper, because as I've mentioned before, I've already drawn a box with the dimensions of the reference photograph. So if I measure what the space is to each one of those lines, it should give me a very good, accurate representation of where everything is for my sketch pad. I also think it's important to understand how wide the head is. So what I did was I put vertical lines next to the braids, which is the widest part of the head. And what I'm doing is I'm measuring out how far it is from the outside of the reference photo to that vertical line for the head is. So basically I'm trying to find out how wide the head is and where it's placed in the box. And it's about 1 inch across and 2 inches down. So that's what I am transferring onto my sketch pad right now. I'm going to be doing this for both sides of the head. So there I have those vertical lines that are going to be transferred over into my sketch pad. Okay, so now that I have those vertical lines in, what I did was I measured from the top of the box that the photo is to the top of the head, and it was about 1/2 inch, so I drew that line in the sketch pad. And then I measured where the hairline was, which was about 1 3/8 inches, and I put that in, and I'm just going down and measuring from the top of the photo to all those lines that I had indicated before. and transferring that into my sketchpad. So doing this is going to help me make sure that all the features are where they're supposed to be on the face. Okay, so to help me keep everything a little bit more symmetrical, I'm putting in a vertical line through the middle of the face here. And then I started laying out the features, starting with the mouth, but I didn't know where the eyes should go. So what I did was I figured I would try to estimate that based on where the nose ends. So I put in 2 vertical lines from the sides of the nose, and that's basically where I started. The eyes, the inside corners of the eyes were in the same plane, I guess, as the nostrils. And then for the mouth, it actually starts and ends in between what would be 2 vertical lines drawn from the middle of the eyes. So I'm looking at the trace versus my freehand, and I'm seeing that the two are very different, and I think the face is a little bit too wide for my freehand, so I just went in and tried to adjust that a little bit. And here I'm measuring from the side of the face to where the lips start, just to make sure that I have it right. But I'm pretty happy with the way the freehand drawing came out. We'll just have to see how it is at the end. So I'm moving on here to the grid method, and what I did was I put tick marks every half an inch going down, and the same thing going across. But as I mentioned before, it's actually 5 1/4 by 5 1/2. So on the left hand side there, you'll see that I have a vertical line that's only a 1/4 inch off. And that's okay. I'm just gonna do the same thing for the grid in my sketchpad, and it's gonna be fine because there's not very much information on that side anyway. It's just pretty much blank space. So here I've copied over the grid into my sketchpad, and I'm ready to begin laying the outline in. And for that, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna look at the shoulder blades, the outline of the shoulder, and I'm going to figure out where on the box that outline is. I actually had a little bit more than 5 1/2 going down as well, so I just omitted that information. Everything you see below the bottom line there, I'm not going to take into account. So I'm just trying to figure out where the outline intersects the vertical lines and the horizontal lines of the grid that I just drew. And what I'm doing is, since the shoulder starts about 1/3 of the way up on the vertical line for the first box, I put a tick mark there on my sketchpad grid, and then I looked at where the outline intersects the next vertical line, and so on and so forth. And then you just connect the dots. So you can go slow or fast with this, and you can also play around with how many boxes you have. The more boxes you have, the more accurate your outline is going to be. But you're going to struggle with having to erase the grid marks later, because you will have a portrait that's embroiled with all of those vertical and horizontal lines. And it will be a nightmare to clean up later, as you will see. Yeah, so now I'm trying to clean up the outline as best as I can by erasing all the grid marks. And I really should have gone with a lighter lead pencil, like a 4H or 2H. I did it with a mechanical pencil, which is an HB, so that makes it really hard to take off the pencil. And as I'm doing that, my outline is coming off too, so I have to constantly go back in there and re-establish the lines that I had already created, which was quite a pain to do. So here's how each one of the outlines came out in the end. It took me the longest to do the grid just because I had to erase all the grid lines afterwards, and it was honestly quite unpleasant to do. So that's probably my least favorite method. And between freehanding and tracing, it took sort of almost the same amount of time. I think it was 17 minutes to trace it and about 20 minutes to freehand. So very similar there. And this is what the final results look like. Now, as I mentioned before, the grid method was the least pleasant to do because all the erasing that I had to do at the end. But I think in terms of final results, it actually gave me the best image. So I think in the future what I'm going to do is I'm going to try to put in those grid lines a little bit lighter and or use larger boxes. I think ideally I want to get to a point where I can freehand very easily, but maybe sort of stepping back on how many boxes I use for the grid method is going to help me get to a place where I can freehand the proportions a little bit better. Okay, so that's the end of this video, guys. Thank you so much for watching, and let me know in the comments below which Khaleesi you think came out the best. Thank you so much, and I'll see you guys next week. Bye-bye.